Next up, we have Dr. Omar Mahmood from the US. Born and raised in Southern California, Dr. Omar Mahmood completed his undergraduate studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, where he double majored in psychobiology and Arabic. He then studied traditional Islamic sciences at the Dar al-Mustafa in Tarim, Yemen, before later completing his PhD in clinical psychology at Wayne State University. Dr. Omar is a member of the Board of Directors for Access California Services, a community-based agency that provides social services to the Arab American and Muslim populations in Southern California. He is also a national advisor to the Muslim Youth of North America. Dr. Omar Mahmood's session is entitled Conquering the Mind, Freeing Yourself from Your Fears. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Omar Mahmood.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. Please forgive me, we're having some technical difficulty just transferring the PowerPoint. So inshallah it will come, some slides. But as we wait, I'll just introduce this topic. Freeing yourself of fears. And when we think of fears, we're talking about many of the worries and anxieties that we have in our lives. And what it comes down to is a lot of what we do as people is motivated by fear. Starting from when you're a young child. The young child, a lot of their behaviors, they find that it's motivated by fear. So if the child is scared of doing something, scared of some result, they'll act a certain way to avoid that fear. And that pattern stays throughout your life, actually. You learn that when I'm scared of something, I should somehow get away from it, do something, prevent myself from facing that fear. And sometimes it's useful. Fear is something that Allah has put inside of us, and probably it's good for survival. Because if you think back in traditional times or maybe ancient times, the human being, you need some fear just to survive, whether it be an enemy, an animal attacking you, something happening to you in the dark. If you don't have fear, then you may not be aware of your surroundings. You may not run away right away. You know, it's so built inside of you that it helps you stay alive. And there's actually, you know, theories in psychology about where does it come from? Is it something in your mind and then you tell your body, okay, I'm scared now, I should panic, I should have a fast heart rate and I should run away? Or is it something that originates in the body and it tells your mind, hey, you're scared now? And after much research and people follow these studies and they try to figure it out, there's actually a theory in psychology that much of our fear, at least the perception of fear, originates inside the body. So that your heart starts to beat fast. When you're scared, you maybe can breathe. Your breathing is a little bit fast, maybe hard to breathe. Sometimes your muscles become tense. You know, think about the times that you've been scared in your life, that you've been worried. Maybe your stomach tightens. You feel cold, maybe. Something is going on in your body when you're scared. And this always makes me, there's a verse in Surah Al-Kahf that makes me think of this, this process in your body. And maybe the mashayikh can remind me of the Arabic verse, but when you see the people of the cave, there's a certain fear. If you were to see them, you would fear them. and you would turn away. إذا طلعت عليهم So they're lying there, they're frozen in the people of the cave and it's a kind of a scary looking thing. وإذا طلعت عليهم لوليت منهم فرارا ولملئت منهم رعبا. If you saw them, you would run away. You would see that scary thing, you would turn away, and then you would be filled with fear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tartib is very important in the Quran. He could have said, وَلَمُلِئْتَ مِنْهُمْ رُعْبًا ثُمَّ وَلَّيْتَ مِنْهُمْ فِرَارًا, or something like that, right? لَوَلَّيْتُ مِنْهُمْ, you turn away first, and then you're filled with fear. That the body reacts first, and then the mind realizes, oh, I'm scared. This is freaking me out. But you have to react first, because if fear comes to you very fast, if something scary comes to you, you need to react first. Then later you realize, oh, this is a scary situation. So your body reacts first. And your mind has to then figure out what's going on. And for some people, the mind doesn't figure out. They stay scared in their body. They're worried about death. They're worried about losing something. They're worried about their job, about their education, many fears. And they can't figure out, oh, I'm scared right now. But their body is changing. There's a lot of physiological changes associated with fear. لَوَلَّيْتَ مِنْهُمْ فِرَارًا وَلَمُلِئْتَ مِنْهُمْ رُعْبًا. That you would run away first, and then you would be filled with fear. So the concept comes later after the reaction. So I'm introducing this topic to understand that it's a human condition. It happens to all of us, and we're not always conscious of it. You have to exercise the mind in order to be conscious of the fear response. Otherwise, you just kind of run through life with certain anxieties, certain fears. And that's what we do in psychology. Sometimes all we're doing is just helping the person connect the intellect to what they're feeling, so they can understand, this is why you're feeling this way. This is why you're acting this way, because something scary happened to you in your life. And now your body's responding to it. That's why you're freaking out. That's why you're having panic attacks. Maybe that's why you're feeling like things are tight and you cannot breathe. And then that realization itself is very therapeutic for many people. The point is not to rid ourselves of all fear. That was implanted by Allah in our bodies. You are going to feel fear. There must be some wisdom, some hikmah behind fear. But the point is to not let it overcome your life and control you. You want to be the one in control. You want to understand it and have an awareness of it. So if we can go to the first slide. This was I heard this from Habib Umar, actually, one of my teachers, a line of poetry. ثق بمولاك في جميع الأمور واحسب الخلق كلهم في القبور. Where he said, trust in your God, trust in your Lord, trust in your protector in all of your matters. And you can just consider everyone else already in the grave. In other words, when you feel the world is a scary, stressful place, trust in your protector, trust in your Lord, and just understand we're all heading to one place, the same place. In the material world, we're all going to end up in the grave. So understand that there's a finality to all of this. Even in the worst of situations, it's temporary. This world is temporary, and we all end up in the grave. So it's a nice line of poetry to think about when you're, wondering what to do. Everything's around me. People are stressing me. I'm scared. ثق بالمولاك في جميع الأمور. Trust in your Lord. Put all your trust in your Lord and Allah, in your protector. And everyone else, just remember, we're all heading to the same abode in the earth. So I don't know if you can see this picture. It's kind of dark. But this is actually the graveyard in Doha, in Qatar. And I took this photo myself just a little bit after we buried my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law, Allah yarhamuhu, he just died back in July, so just a few months ago. And it was very sudden, heart attack. Nobody was expecting it. We didn't know that he was even sick or anything. It just, subhanAllah, he had a heart attack and he died. And he was in Arabic they call it adil. He was my adil, which means my wife and his wife, they're sisters. So you think of two sisters, and then adil comes from a word meaning like adl. It's almost like balance, justice or balance. So we're the two men on the other side kind of balancing the equation. So he was adili. I was not related to him by blood, but we shared a lot of funny things because we were married into the same family. So we can we have the right to maybe make fun of the family or something because we know what's going on. Nobody else understood what we were going through because we married into two sisters of the same family. So I always thought that was a beautiful way that the Arabs use that term, adil. He balanced me out in that sense. And so losing him was a big loss for all of us in our family. And it took us a long time not a long time, but the initial shock is so powerful. For the first few weeks when a loved one dies, when you lose somebody, you don't even really know what's going on. It's so surreal. It doesn't even feel real. Sometimes we were thinking, is he really gone? He might just come back. You almost feel like he's going to show up any moment or walk into the room. It's when you visit the grave that you really remember this is where we buried him. We put him inside the ground. And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, he said, زُورُوا الْقُبُورَ فَإِنَّهَا تُذَكِّرُكُمُ الْآخِرَةَ وَتُزَهِّدُكُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا. Visit the graves because it will remind you of the next life and it will make you less connected to this life. You will be less, worried about material world, the dunya. You'll feel less connected because this is all temporary. And so that's a reflection. Whenever we visit him in the graveyard, we can kind of, ponder that life is so temporary, so fleeting. Somebody is here with you and then the next day they're not. But to think about that, it's not easy because once all the family goes, the janazah is gone, the azza, they finish all the people, family, bringing food and all these things. Once everybody goes home, maybe 1 month, 1.5 months after the death, then you're alone. My sister-in-law is alone with the kids in the house. That's when it hits you. Because when the first death, when it happens, everybody shows up and gives you support and they're there. But once they all go, how do you deal with the loss, the grief in your heart? That is the time when it starts to hit you, and then it may go away and then it may come back again a few months later. It's not one thing, it takes a process to grieve. Grieving is a process, but you need that time. Some people, I feel very bad for some people if somebody dies and then they have to move and something else happens and they never got the chance to properly grieve. They never got the chance to feel sad and just ponder it, and so it affects them even years later because they didn't kind of tie a knot on it and close that chapter. It's still constantly haunting them. So to be able to get past it is something that we have to think about. The world is a scary place, the dunya. And as they say in a famous qasida, وَذِي دُنْيَا دَنِيَا حَوَادِثُهَا كَثِيرًا وَعِيشَتَهَا حَقِيرًا وَمُدَّتْهَا قَصِيرًا وَلَا يَحْرِصْ عَلَيْهَا سِوَى أَعْمَى الْبَصِيرًا. From the famous poem, the qasida, أَلَا يَاللَّهِ بِنَظَرًا. So the dunya, it's filled with a lot of accidents, so many things that happen, things that are very strange and they hurt sometimes and painful. And the life is sometimes quite difficult and you don't even like it sometimes. And then on top of all of this, it's very short, so even if you thought maybe I could find a way to make it nice, it's very short. So the only people who focus on this life so much are people who are spiritually blind a little bit. You're not seeing the whole picture if you're so focused on this life. That's the beauty of Islam and the believer, is that we have the akhirah to think about. So the akhirah always helps you balance out the troubles that you face in the dunya, because then you start to realize this world is not very long. The akhirah is forever. So it helps you put things in context and you don't feel as as terrible about it. It's like when my son cries about something very simple. I have to explain to him, I have to give him some perspective. I tell him, like, this is not really the normal thing to cry about, because if you look around the world, there are people who are going through very bad situations, very difficult things, and maybe they should be the ones crying. This little thing is not as bad. And then my son thinks about it, and then he might cry again, and then eventually, But the idea that perspective sometimes will change the way you look at a situation. I thought the example that Ustad Iqbal gave about the teacher and the black dot, that's so important, because if you focus just on that, if you zoom in on the dot, it's very black. But if you zoom out and you see the whole picture, it's just a tiny blip. It's not even significant. That's the same way that we have to look at the world. The world is a scary, harsh place. It's meant for tests and tribulations. The believer, we understand that. That some people think it's kind of a dark way to look at the world, but it's just, that's how the believer looks at the world. As Imam al-Haddad says, "Ad-dunya la rahata fiha." The dunya has no actual relaxation in it. There's no enjoyment in the dunya, lasting enjoyment. It's all temporary. The only lasting enjoyment comes from the akhirah, comes from your connection to Allah. So these are just some statistics about fear and anxiety. This comes from the American population, because that's what I have access to. Some of these concepts we've talked about in previous Sacred Path conferences. So if you've been to the Sacred Path in Singapore, you might have heard me talk about this, but since this is the first time in Malaysia, I feel it's okay to repeat some of this information. But we know that anxiety is very common in many people, and even in children. In young people, there's a significant percentage that will feel anxiety and have these fears. It's something that it's part of the human experience. As I said, fear is built into you, but if it gets too overwhelming, then it turns into like a disorder, like anxiety. So we know the source is there, and then it can get exacerbated and turn into something worse. This is Yahya, because I don't want you all to say like, oh, Dr. Omar started with a very dark topic and he showed us a picture of the grave and it was very sad and everything. So I'm just showing you a picture of baby Yahya, just to remember. He was actually a little baby in Qatar who my brother-in-law was always very caring for and always loved, and this was one of his employees' babies. And he was always, every time we see Yahya, we're reminded of my brother-in-law, Hasib, Allah yarhamu, because they were always so close. But then that's the beauty of the cycle of life, right? People die and other people are born. There's some sadness and then there's a new joy. And that happens every day. People are passing on and new people are entering the world. So we have to always keep this in perspective, right? This helps with our understanding of loss and fear, because things are constantly changing and Allah is replacing things, and He takes the night and He turns it into day, and then the day He turns it into night again. So there's a cyclical nature to this, that the sunnah of Allah is that it's always repeating like this in cycles. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, a very famous, obviously, dhikr, line of Quran that we try to recite, we try to repeat it to ourselves. And you use that in times of feeling fear to calm yourself down. How do you calm down? I cannot remove the fearful stimulus. I cannot take away the thing that is causing me to feel scared. I cannot even control the feeling inside me. So what can I do then to react to this? That's the only choice you really do have is what is your approach going to be when you feel the fear? So you try to take something that will help you calm down. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. In some of the adhkar, you repeat this, 70, 75 times, 100 times. You repeat this statement that Allah is enough for me, and He is the best of people to be, not, astaghfirullah, not people, but the best of beings to be in charge. You know, Allah is the best of anyone to be in charge. He is the caretaker, the protector. So, hasbunallah, Allah is enough. Allah suffices. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, he used to say that, I find it strange when people are very, scared and fearful, and they don't immediately go to this verse, hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. Because we know that it's there, it's a way to calm you down. And he said, because at the end of in the next ayah, Allah says, and they return to Allah with the favor and grace from Allah, no harm having touched them. That if you are able to remind yourself that Allah is my suffice, Allah is sufficient for me, He's the caretaker, then I know that no real harm is going to touch me. Like, the only things that come to me are whatever Allah wills to come to me. And I'm surrounded by His blessings and His grace and His mercy. The topic that Ustaz Zain mentioned about the gratitude is so important, because in times of fear and anxiety, looking around you, you do lose perspective on all the blessings that you have in life. Sometimes it happens when someone dies, it's like after, people close to us die, then we come home and we ask forgiveness from our husband or our wife, our parents, our children. We're realizing, please forgive me, all my shortcomings, life is short, and people around us start dying. You start to realize these are small, petty things that we're arguing about sometimes. And, it serves as a reminder in that way as well. So this is something I did talk about in Singapore too. And the idea of driving. It's a good example to use when you're thinking about fear. Because the main concept with fear and loss and grief is you don't feel like you're in control. And people get really scared about that. So when you're driving, many people feel, okay, I'm driving, I'm in control. And then stuff starts to happen on the road, and you realize I'm not in control. So this is from a conversation where someone, I was talking, and they said, the hardest thing for me to deal with is traffic. It's so stressful. Because in traffic, when you're driving, you have no choice, right? There's all these people in front of you, and you're trying to get somewhere, and now it's just stress, and you're realizing, I cannot get to my destination because there's other things in the way that I cannot even control. I can barely control my own self, and now there's all these other obstacles in the way. And so driving itself can be like major tarbiyat an-nafs, you're driving in the car, it can really affect your ego and kind of beat your ego down. Because in the end, you're kind of learning, I can't get out of this, this is it. And they were telling us yesterday, we were at the museum, and they're like, okay, come on, you guys got to go home now, because once it's Friday, once the traffic starts, you're going to be stuck coming out of KL. You guys have a lot of traffic. I mean, you guys, you have a decent amount of traffic. I'm from LA, so in California, we have a lot of traffic too. And this is the 405 freeway. It's the busiest freeway in America, in Los Angeles. We have millions of people in LA. You have a lot of people here too in KL, but our roads are just, everybody has a car, in Los Angeles. Everybody has a car. One family might have 4 cars. This is just to show you, maybe you didn't realize in that first picture, so I want to show you, Los Angeles traffic is really, really stressful. And maybe this is still not enough. Let me show you from the air. This is at night. It's going for miles. They say 379,000 cars in just one day, in this one stretch here. So when you drive that every day, you learn you're not in control. You know, Allah is in control. There's no control I have when I'm driving, even though I try to think I am driving and I'm in control. But you use that same analogy with your life. Your life, you think you're driving, but you're not. And it stresses people out. But the beauty of Islam is that we just let Allah drive, autopilot, He'll drive a self-driving car, Then I don't stress as much, or I'm not as stressed if someone else is driving, I just sit in the car and I just, read or do something, talk to somebody, talk on my phone, you listen to the radio. It's easy when you're not driving. The driver, he's stressed, but everyone else in the car is relaxed. So that's the concept we're trying to get in our lives. Don't try to be the driver in your life. You will never be in control of your life. You have to let go and understand that Allah is in control. So we had a discussion at SPOL in Singapore last year. Let go and let God. Let Allah, be in charge of your life. He is in charge of your life, but you do not. Sometimes your awareness is not there. So bring your mind to understand that and let Allah do what it is that Allah does, which is He is Al-Qadir, He is the one who is in charge of all of these things. So understanding that, He has a plan and He will send you things in your life, and it looks like traffic and it looks like obstacles and sometimes it's painful, but you don't have to be responsible for all of that. Take the burden off your shoulder. Take that weight away from you. Don't feel so down and stressed out by this. This is not your burden to bear. Allah has some plan for you, and that gives you a sense of relief in your heart. That makes you feel calmer. That makes you feel like, okay, Allah is in control. So another famous dhikr that you will find in many of the awrad, repeated many times, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. That I surrender all of my affairs to Allah. Let Allah handle it. He can see it all. It's not as if His view is way more comprehensive than my view could ever be. I have such a very limited view. So let me hand it over to Allah because He is in control. And you repeat this over and over in the awrad, in the dhikrs, to remind yourself consciously and maybe unconsciously that I don't have to exert control or try to exert control over the affairs of my life. Now, that doesn't mean you don't plan and you don't come up with strategy in your life. Of course, khud bil asbab. You take the means by which we do things in life. If you get in the car, you put on the seatbelt. It's not like you say, oh, Allah is going to protect me. No, Allah has given you asbab in the life. You should plan accordingly, try your life out according to a certain goals and things you want to achieve. But if the path is not exactly what you thought it would be, then be okay with that. Be flexible enough to understand that maybe Allah's plan is not the one that I had in mind. And I have to be able to adjust. I have to be flexible. I have to understand that He has some plan for me. And you'll be much less stressed. The whole point is you'll be much less stressed out about it, less fearful, less anxious. And it's because you don't feel as connected to one particular plan. You're flexible enough to know there could be many plans out there for you. But if you focus on one path, then any deviation from that path is going to feel very scary. You say like, no, this is what I had always been planning. But if you understand that there could be many paths, then it's less frightening. So we're talking about travel or traffic, we're talking about getting in the car, so I think it's important to remember the dua of safar, the dua of traveling. And one of the most amazing lines in this particular dua to me is Allahumma anta sahibu fi safar wa khalifatu fil ahl. That is so amazing to me because you're saying, oh Allah, you are with me when I travel and I'm leaving you behind with my family. Allah, you are with me as I go travel, but you are also the one staying back and watching over my family. Nobody else can do that. No other travel companion can go with you and stay home and watch your family. Nobody can do that except Allah. So Allahumma anta sahibu fi safar. You are with us as we travel, but you're also staying back and protecting my wealth and my family and all of our house and everything like that. So to me, that's another way to think about it. It's another reminder that whatever I do, wherever I go, I can keep Allah near me. That's my protector. But then I can also remind myself, He's not just protecting me. He's protecting everything that's close to me and dear to me. So to me, that's such an amazing thing that you think about when you're leaving, especially when you're about to leave for travel. You know, you go, you make wudu, you get in, you're going to go travel somewhere. Maybe you pray 2 rak'ahs and you get in your car or you get in the airplane. And that whole time, you know, maybe you're thinking about where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And at the same time, you're reminding yourself, you might start feeling scared, feeling fearful about the journey you're about to take. And this is, by the way, what we do everything in life. If you're going to go to school, if you're going to go to a new job, if you're going to go get married to somebody, if you're going to go try a new thing in your life, you're always on a journey and you get a little scared and you're worried and you're still connected to other things that you're a little afraid to leave behind. And so understanding that Allah is covering all of it is a great way to reduce the fear and the anxiety in your heart. So after my brother-in-law died, Allah yarhamu, after he passed away, it was, you know, maybe a month or something later, little over more than a month later. He died in the end of July, and then in the beginning of September, my wife and I, we went to make Hajj. And when you go to make Hajj, it's like a lot of people, you know, they ask for forgiveness, for du'as. You try to make sure everything in your life is set and, you know, all your affairs are sorted out. And we even were thinking about our will, you know, writing our will, you know, who's going to take care of the children? If we die, who's going to watch the children? And we're just taking a plane to go to, you know, Mecca and do the Hajj, but the Hajj has something about it, it makes you realize the shortness of this world. And like you think, you know, people do die when they go to Hajj. And in the old days, it would take you 6 months on a boat just to get to Mecca or to Jeddah, and then you have to, you know, take the caravans and all this. So you may or may not even come back. And so you want to make sure your life is all sorted out when you leave. So that was a really good spiritual exercise for us, because we started to think about, what am I leaving behind? And Allah, at the end, there's just too many variables. You can't think of everything. So you put it in Allah's care. You say, Allah, this is in your hands. You know, and you think about kind of the final nature of things. And then, you know, shortly after we made the Hajj, I got news that a close friend of mine, who we shared a lot of spiritual practice, you know, spiritual journeys together, I guess you could say, when we were younger, he got diagnosed with a disease that's basically a terminal illness. Most people with the disease will die, you know, 6 months, maybe 1 year, 1.5 years, or 2 years. Allahu Alam, we don't know. But it's known as it's a degenerative disease. Eventually it kills the person. And so that was somebody close to me as well. And, you know, we're getting now to the age where people we know are dying and, you know, getting sick. And then shortly after that, a close friend of mine that I knew from college had cancer, and he passed away as well. And the thing is, what I found amazing was each one of these experiences was preparing me for the next. That first, you know, my brother-in-law dies, then I go to Hajj, then my friend gets sick, and another friend dies. But each one is kind of like giving you a perspective, so the next one is not as difficult. by the time, like, the fourth person was, dying for me, like, it's not that I wasn't sad. Of course I was sad, but I wasn't as shaken about it because Allah had given me a series of experiences. So by the end, I'm like, okay, so, Allah, life is temporary. I understand that now. I'm not as shocked by it. It's usually when we're not even thinking about it and something happens, then we're completely shocked. We're completely unaware of what's happening. But when you've been thinking about it and we're getting reminders, regular reminders, it's not that bad. Actually, you don't feel so depressed. You don't feel so worried about it. And that's a blessing. That's actually a blessing from Allah, that your mind has the ability to do that. And human beings are very resilient. We can adjust to things in our life. So even when people come to me in my psychology clinic and they're saying that, like, they've had major things that have happened in their life, difficult things, traumatic things, violent things, or very sad things in their life, it's always amazing to me how the human being can recover, how they can come back. Allah has put a certain strength inside of us that you can come back, that you don't lose hope. You should not lose, hope. As they say in the dua in Fajr, وَلَا تَجْعَلْنَا مِنَ الْقَانِطِينَ. Allah, don't make us from people that are despairing, that we have no hope. Constantly allow us to be those that can remind ourselves of the hopefulness of the future, that there's some way out. There's always some way to overcome or adjust. And remember that it's the nature of Allah that He can expand and He can restrict. Al-Qabid and Al-Basit, that your life is going to be a series of expansive feelings and constrictive feelings. These are the characteristics, these are the attributes of Allah. This is how He helps us experience the world. So if you have some expectation of that, then it's not as surprising when it happens. The nature of ghafla, or heedlessness, is I forget about this and I just go through my life, and then suddenly I'm hit with something difficult and I have no idea what's going on. But if you remind yourself of these things, then it's less dangerous for you. You don't feel so surprised by it. It's not easy. I'm not going to say it's always easy to remember this, and to any difficulty in my life, I can be okay. Any hardship, I can be okay. No, it's going to be difficult, but it's a state of mind that the believer must have. It's a mental state in your mind that you have to think about as you go through life, as you face the hardships, and also as you teach others in your life about facing hardships. That you have to be the one that also, sometimes you have someone close to you who's going through something difficult. You might have to help them remember these concepts and be that source of remembrance, of the reminder for them. So I think Ustad Iqbal mentioned this very important hadith, كُلُّهُ خَيْرٌ. It's all good. عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَأَمْرُهُ كُلُّهُ خَيْرٌ. How amazing is the matter of a believer, because it's all good. It's all good. إِنْ أَصَابُهُ السَّرَّاءُ الشَّكَرُ وَإِنْ أَصَابُهُ الضَّرَّاءُ الصَّبْرُ أَوْ إِنْ أَصَابُهُ الضَّرَّاءُ الصَّبْرُ وَإِنْ أَصَابُهُ السَّرَّاءُ الشَّكَرُ وَمَا كَانَ ذَلِكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا الْمُؤْمِنِ أَوْ كَمَا قَالَ. That when you are afflicted with hardship, you're patient. إِنْ أَصَابُهُ الضَّرَّاءُ صَبْرُ وَإِنْ أَصَابُهُ السَّرَّاءُ شَكَرُ. And if you are afflicted with ease, you're thankful. Gratitude. Interesting thing is that the Prophet in the Hadith, he's using the same word, asaba. Musiba, it's still a musiba. Darra is musiba. Hardship, that's an affliction. That's a test. But sarra is also a musiba. Having ease, having luxury, having money, that's also an affliction. That's also a test. And some people, they don't realize they're in a test because they're feeling good. I have money, my family's happy, things seem good. They don't realize this is also an affliction, because some people do worse in that situation. They actually get further from Allah in happy times. In sad times, a lot of people come to Allah. A lot of people turn to Allah in sad times. But in happy times, many people forget. And that can be an affliction in and of itself. And our teachers used to tell us that sometimes some people, it's a personality thing. Some people are just different. There are some people, Allah keeps them pretty rich or pretty comfortable lifestyle. Because if He were to afflict them with poverty or too much difficulty, they may lose their iman. They may say, Allah, this is not going to work. I hate this world, and they lose their faith. So he out of His mercy, He keeps some people at a certain level, certain socioeconomic status, a certain lifestyle. Because they're the type of person some people just can't handle, Some people are okay with camping. They go out camping in the desert or mountains. They can go live in a small cabin, tent. They're okay with it. Other people, they cannot stand it. It's just not their personality. They need some comforts in life. And the opposite is true. Allah keeps certain people at a minimal status. And they're believing, they're happy, whatever. But because if they were to get a lot of money and get really a luxurious lifestyle, they may also forget Allah. They'd be too consumed by it, like it's too much. Some people sugar is like that for some people. Some people just take a little bit of sugar and they're okay. But if they were to eat all the sugar, they would just go into shock, They can't handle too much. And it's not everybody's the same. Each individual has your own personal style. And Allah is aware of that. So sometimes He's giving you the exact dosage that you need. Or He's trying to help you maybe increase your tolerance one way or another. And to test where you're at. The life is a test, we know that. So remembering that it's easy to know that the hardships are a test, but it's not always easy to remember that even the good things are a test. Because maybe, will you be thankful? Will you remember Allah when everything is good and easy? When things are hard, a lot of people turn towards Allah. But if you're the believer state, kulluhu khair, then that kind of thing doesn't really matter to you. It's fine. I'm still focused on Allah. That's the secret of Sayyidina Harith radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ met this young boy. And he says, "Kayf asbahta ya Harith?" And how did you find yourself this morning? And he describes amazing things. Asbahtu mu'minan billahi haqqa. I am a true believer, he says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet says, okay, well, watch what you say. انظر ما تقول يا حارث فإنما لكل حق حقيقة وما حقيقة إيمانك. If you got to watch what you say, if you think you're a true believer, every statement like that has a reality. So what's the reality of your iman? And Haritha, he starts describing amazing things. And one of the things he says is, عَزَفَتْ نَفْسِي عَنِ الدُّنْيَا, that my soul is not connected to the material world. فَاسْتَوَى عِنْدِي ذَهَبُهَا وَحَجَرُهَا, that to me the rocks of this world are the same as the gold. They're both material things. In other words, when you're in that state, the ups and downs, the good times and the bad times, it's all pretty much the same to you. They're not really your source of joy. Your source of joy is your connection to Allah. And so you're kind of okay with whatever you're at. Of course, you're going to have adjustment time. You might take a little time to reflect. You might have some hardships and some difficulties. That's fine. That's human nature. We're not going to be perfect. But then we recalibrate, and we adjust back to the baseline. We always have our little hiccups. We always have our little trials that we go through. So I'll cover this at the end, the famous dua of the Prophet ﷺ, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan wa a'udhu bika min al-ajzi wal-kasal wa a'udhu bika min al-jubni wal-bukhul wa a'udhu bika min ghalabat ad-dayn wa qahr ar-rijal. Again, another one of the du'as that are repeated daily in the different awrad, the different collections of adhkar that many Muslims recite on a daily basis. And the meaning of this, O Allah, I seek refuge in you from worry and sadness, and from inability and laziness, fear and miserliness, or cowardliness and miserliness, and overwhelming debt, and the being overpowered by men, like oppression. And so al-hammi wal-hazan, that's the worry and the sadness. Al-ajzi wal-kasal, that's like an inability to do something. You could be unable to do something because of your own weakness, or you could be unable to do something just because you don't have motivation. Both of them are bad. So both of them the Prophet is teaching us, seek refuge in Allah from. Because there might be a goal in your life, and you can't get there because you're unable to, or you can't get there because you're not motivated, you're just lazy. And then also you may not do something because you're feeling a little bit cowardly at the moment. And so you don't take the risk. Or you could not take the risk because you're too focused on what you have. You're a little bit miserly about what you have, and you don't want to risk it, and like, oh, I got all this, and if I try this, I won't be able to do it. So he's showing you these are extremes, states that prevent you from getting to a certain goal. And they kind of complement each other. And then overwhelming debt and being overpowered by men. Those are very serious social, economic or political situations that could be preventing goals in your life or your whole society's life. So, powerful things. If you're in debt, or if there's an army attacking you, then of course this is going to be a major problem. So seeking refuge in Allah. But out of all these trials and tribulations, the first two that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned are emotional states. He could have mentioned the armies first, or debt, or miserliness, these other things, but he mentions worry and fear as the first two in this dua. Again, emphasizing how common this is for all human beings. You will face this. You saw the stats on anxiety. Most people in their life, at some point in their life, experience anxiety. Maybe not long term, but everybody has some moment where they experience it. It's too common. It's part of the human experience from childhood till death. At some point, it's natural to experience. So this is just, I'll close with some steps that you can take when you're trying to conquer your fears or trying to face your fears. If you notice, I was talking about dhikr and reminding the concept. I mentioned that a lot during the talk. There's certain du'as, there's certain adhkar, there's certain verses of the Quran you recite on a regular basis. If you read any of the famous awrad, the Wird al-Latif, Imam al-Haddad, any of the ma'thurat, the Wird of Imam Nawawi, any of the collections of adhkar where they basically took statements of Quran and statements of the Hadith and they compiled it into kind of a prescriptive, meditative mantra to repeat. And people use that as kind of their morning dose or their evening dose of dhikr. There's a sort of a spiritual medicine concept to it. So you have to have that repetition. Why is that important to repeat these dhikrs? Because it starts to inculcate it into your mind until it becomes second nature. Nothing really happens except with repetition. For the last 2 years I've been training in jiu-jitsu. And I really like martial arts and training. But our instructors, they always tell us you have to drill these things over and over. There's certain movements, certain ways you have to drill. So when you're actually in the fight, it's second nature for you. You do it immediately. You know how to sweep or do a certain choke or do a certain arm lock because I've drilled it so many times that I don't think about it when I'm faced with the situation. So the same thing with dhikr and spiritual concepts. You have to have the repetition so that in the moment of trial and tribulation, you don't have to even process it. It just comes out naturally. And that's the scary thing, right? Because we want to be prepared. I'm always worried about how prepared am I really. I don't think I don't do my adhkar enough, I don't think, as I should. And it sometimes, I do feel worried about it sometimes, because imagine, have you ever driven in a car? Again, we'll go back to the driving example. Have you ever been driving and then at the last minute somebody cuts you off, or a animal comes, or a car you didn't realize was braking, and then you have to slam on your brakes, and you think for a second, I might even hit this. I might get in an accident right now. In those situations, what do you say? That's always the test. Some people say, oh, and then something else comes out of their mouth, right? Usually not a good word. And that has to do with the repetition, right? That has to do with what were you planning to say? And you won't know until the time comes. So, but if your heart is one of dhikr, maybe your last thing might be la ilaha illallah or something, Great. That's a great way to end, like at least it's dhikr, I mean, how sad is that? The angel is writing your last words, and your last word is like something X-rated, R-rated. You can't even write it down. He's ashamed to write it down. He's writing her down like, oh man, this is how this guy died. And he closes your book. But how beautiful it would be if it's remembrance of Allah. That's husnul khatimah. Ya Allah biha, ya Allah biha, ya Allah bi husnul khatimah. How can we get a nice ending? And that the only way you can prepare for that is to make the dhikr easy on your tongue, so that's the first thing you go to. And then you practice it in theory. You think about hardship and what would be my reaction if I had this loss, or if somebody passed away, or if I lost this job, or if all this was taken away, what would be my reaction? You think about it on a theory level. You ponder. Reflection is very, very important. There's fikr and dhikr, and Imam Ali, he used to say that if you can engage in reflection, sometimes that's even more worthy than all night of prayer, because you're thinking about these things. And then you practice in reality, because in reality you will be tested. You will get some loss. Some sad thing is going to happen to you in your life. So that you should take that as an opportunity. Okay, now here it is. I'm in this sad situation. What should I do? This is a very scary thing happening to me. What should I do? And you use that as an opportunity, a learning experience. And as I said, each time it happens, then the next one happens is a little bit easier. And the next one happens is a little bit easier. So you have a practical, reality-based exercise as well. And then spiritual health and well-being. Make sure you maintain your own sense of well-being. A lot of times we're always concerned about other people in our lives, and we forget to pay attention to ourselves. Like, it happens a lot when I'm seeing a child with special needs, or a child that's having some major problems in school or with behavior, and the family will bring in this kid, and the kid is all over the place. They have a lot of symptoms. It's very difficult for the family. Not much sleep in the family. People are very sad, and how come my child is like this, but other children are not? And so we're working on it with the child. But then I'll always ask the parents, and especially the mother. I'll ask, so what are you doing to take care of yourself? What's your self-care right now? Because if you're stressed out, what about your other kids and everyone else in the family? Everyone will be affected. But if you're in a healthy place, then you'll be more effective of a person. So sometimes you have to take time, even though it may seem selfish, you need some time to remove and have your own retreat, whether you go do some physical activity, or you go ponder, or you take a break on your own and just have a moment of peace, or you spend some time with your friends who can give you some emotional support. You have to have these self-care things in mind, so that you know that it's not just you taking on all these burdens, but also you're protecting yourself a little bit, so that you can help the other people in your life that you want to help them. So I ask Allah, inshallah, to allow us to be people of dhikr. I'll ask Allah to allow us to be people who react with a sense of purpose and a sense of connectedness to Allah in times of hardship and in times of ease. Oh Allah, we ask you to make us amongst the thankful and amongst the patient. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والعفو منكم.